Hello, everyone. We're live. We've called ourselves Feminists for Free Speech, despite the fact that the word feminism has become rather, annoying to me. I don't want to put words. Oh, wait. Sorry, I can hear us on YouTube. Let me turn that off. I don't know if you could hear that. I have that open in another window. Yeah, so I think as we covered in the first episode of what is to be a 4-part series called Where Are All the Women, we had been feeling like, I don't know if you all have noticed, that women have been a little bit erased, not only by trans activism, but then women had begun to be erased from the whole conversation around transgenderism, trans activism, the gender identity ideology takeover of every institution across North America practically. And we got tired of seeing this question being asked over and over again, where are all the women? Because the women are here, and the women have been trying to speak out and warn about the transgender creep for many decades now. I have not personally been doing this for many decades now, but there are feminists like Germaine Greer and Janice Raymond and Robin Morgan, who we talked about last week, or sorry, not last week, on the last stream, which I guess would have been 2 or 3 weeks ago. But yeah, I mean, I think we also kind of wanted to represent women who have identified as feminists. Women, I mean, I think that we all are feminists. It's just that I think that I've rejected that label in that ideological box. Feminists who actually support free speech instead of feminists who support free speech for us, but not for them, those of us who don't align ideologically or politically. So I do want to mention, before we get into more things, please like and subscribe. That helps other people see these videos. It helps get the word out. It helps support my channel, of course, and our project. I've included links down below in the show notes. We are organizing in a variety of ways, but we would like to start organizing in-person events. We did some in-person events in Austin. Was that last year? Must have been last year, right? Yeah. I can't hear you, Isabella, but is that on purpose, maybe?
I had muted myself.
Oh,
sorry. That was October 2022.
Yeah. And yeah, so we're fundraising to hopefully organize more in-person events addressing transgenderism, gender identity, free speech, civil liberties, bodily autonomy, and things like that. And we would love it if you could donate to support that project, those projects, our work, so on and so forth. Also, please use the live chat. Please ask questions if you have any in the live chat. If you really want me to see something and I'm missing it, please use the super chat so that I notice. I can't keep up with all of the comments and questions in the live chat, unfortunately. But I will do my very best. So, without further ado, this is Isabella. Isabella, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, everyone. I am a former doula who was indoctrinated into trans ideology in 2016 at a birth and postpartum doula training in New York City, where I was told there was a very mean group of midwives circulating a very hateful, bigoted letter, which now I know to be the letter that Ray Lou authored, protesting the removal of the words woman and mother from the core competency components of the midwifery training for the Midwives Alliance of North America. Erased women for 3 years, woke up to the trans agenda, and made it my full-time job. So I now host a podcast called the Whose Body Is It podcast, and I'm committed to educating women on the many tentacles, ideologies, technologies that are trying to control our minds, our bodies,
Thank you. And below me is Mary Lou, who this past week I discovered was my angel mother. So I'd like to introduce. I'm pretty sure I have more than one angel mother. So I have like a few different angel mothers in mind, but I'm pretty sure that Mary Lou is one of my angel mothers. So welcome, my angel mother, Mary Lou Singleton.
I'm beyond honored, but I also want to hear more about that sometime. So,
I also learned that I'm a misplaced zygote.
Oh.
I think. I was born into the wrong family, not the wrong body.
I'm Mary Lou Singleton. I'm the author of the Mean Letter Isabella heard about in 2015. My friend Michelle Pacino and I, another midwife, wrote an open letter to the Midwives Alliance of North America protesting the erasure of the words woman and mother from the core competencies guidelines of the midwives. I'm a longtime women's rights activist. I'm a midwife. I'm a nurse practitioner. And I wore my vagina is not a construct shirt tonight, which I got at the last Michigan Women's Music Festival in 2015. At that festival, women would wear red to signal that you supported women-only space and that you wanted the festival to remain only for women-born women. So that is
Nice.
my story.
I didn't know that about the red at Mishfest. Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us. I have turned on the monetization button so that you can use the super chat if you like. The video was already limited. It was already demonetized.
Really?
Like 1 minute in. So I guess they didn't like what they thought we might have to say. I have to say. Everything that I post is they demonetize. Sorry, I'm getting off track. The last video that I put up, which was an interview for The Same Drugs with Mike Nania about his films called The Reformers, they limited for no apparent reason. They just limit everything on my channel. YouTube is not a fan of me, but maybe YouTube will go down and then that'll be their karma. Okay. Today, I think that we talk an awful lot about the men who become women, the men who want to become women, and what's behind that, things like autogynephilia, pornography, and, you know, and of course the way that transgenderism and gender identity ideology and legislation have harmed women, including by allowing predatory men access to women's spaces, transition houses, jails, change rooms. But we haven't talked on this stream about the women who want to become men. And of course, the young women who think that they want to become boys or men have overtaken the young men who want to become women. It's become a very troubling trend, which of course Abigail Schreier covers in her book very well. But you know, it's a bit baffling because the motivations seem quite different. Because of this fetishistic aspect, you know, like I tend to think, and I've gotten the impression that the women who transition to men are not doing it because they have sexual fetishes. Women aren't big fans of sexual fetishes in general. Sorry to make sweeping generalizations about women. We're just not as gross as men are. So, yeah, but I think, I mean, there are definitely some key trans man figures in the transgender movement that have really, really pushed things forward. There's this guy, there's a woman who identifies as a man. I think that she transitioned at around 50. She was a lesbian, and she is the chair of transgender studies at UVic. Her name is now Erin DeVore. It used to be Holly. And I believe that position was funded by Jennifer Pritzker. And this Erin DeVore individual had Martine Rothblatt as the keynote speaker at her first transgender studies conference that was held at UVic, and then gave him some kind of honorary degree in 2019. And I think that it seems as though that position, that chair in transgender studies, has been very influential in terms of getting transgender studies into universities across Canada. And of course, Erin has received enormous amounts of funding, shirt grants, and so on and so forth, year after year after year, grants that are like hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, I mean, there's not very much information about her in particular online, but all of these individuals, like the men, I suppose, seem invested in disconnecting human beings from their human bodies, and seem convinced by this idea that sex is really just a construct, and there really is no difference between men and women, and there shouldn't be any difference between men and women, and there doesn't have to be a difference between men and women. But I'm curious to know what you both have ascertained about this trend. Not just the young women. The young women, I think, might be different than the older women who transitioned some time ago and sort of became leaders in this transgender movement. So yeah, I'm curious to know your experiences and what you've learned. I don't know who wants to start. Isabella or Mary Lou?
Sure, I can start.
Okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think even though I wouldn't classify it necessarily as a fetish, what the women are doing, it's still a reduction. Like, it's still an objectification. It's still, I think Jennifer Billick's words are like, it's an objectification of opposite sex characteristics. So there is a reduction going on. And I think the sexual element is not necessarily dangerous to a class of people, but like a symptom of self-loathing, like, I'll never be the Justin Bieber, heartthrob that all the girls love. So I'm going to get all this surgery to like try to emulate, like wanting that kind of fangirl. Like, you see a lot of these women emulate like young, like a lot of them end up looking like young, like prepubescent men, like on the younger side. On the older side, I wonder if it's more of like there's more of an, like, I'm thinking about the older lesbians, like Buck Angel, like there's more of a machismo aesthetic to the performance of the opposite sex, where she's actually like grooming, like as a pornographer, like it's, so I think there is a sexual component, but the repercussions are different. Like, it's not as necessarily like materially dangerous. Like, they're not necessarily going to turn into rapists, but like, I don't know. I mean, they're on steroids. So like, they have personality disorders, they're on steroids. It's definitely not like a good combination. But yeah, that was my first thought about the, like, how do we hold women to the same standard of like not reducing other people to their parts? And it's like a similar discussion with the third party reproductive tech. Like, how do we hold lesbians accountable to also not reduce men to their products? Like, to what they can produce for them, like pick and choose. Yeah.
Right, because there's still the factor of handing over women's fertility and reproductive capacity, and something that is really only inherent to females and really special and powerful for women, and handing that over to tech.
Or even not, well, even, yeah, I mean, if you consider a turkey baster tech, like I've thought, like, okay, where's the line? And this is like a whole nother tangent, but like, seeking out a man in your life to use him for his sperm, even if you're not going to do IVF or surrogacy, but like reducing him to what he can give to you, or like what he can provide for you, and like discarding the rest. And like, yeah, so I think there is an objective. There is like in both cases, whether a woman is medicalizing to emulate the opposite sex characteristics, or, you know, trying to use sperm from a man that she likes, you know, wants her baby to be conceived by, you know, with, there is a reduction, there is an objectification. But with the medicalization, yeah, under like the trans man umbrella, it's, yeah, the material consequences of like rape and violence like aren't the same as when we're talking about, you know, the sexual fetish of autogynephilia, because those are men and we're talking about women.
It seems more obvious with men that they either fall into very effeminate, self-hating, gay men who've been told their whole lives they're effeminate, and the AGPs, the autogynephiliacs, autogynephiles. With women, I do think that it, you know, just gets down to internalized misogyny and bristling against misogyny. And if we go back to Simone de Beauvoir, she, all those years ago, said a woman can either be female or she can be human. And if she acts human, she's accused of acting like a man. And I think most of us as girls and young women bump up against that if you want to be fully expressive of yourself, it feels like then you have to be like a guy, right? You're one of the guys. I think a lot of, even those, you know, who us who described ourselves as feminists for a long time went through our I'm just one of the guys phase, right? Because we don't want to be in that objectified girly girl culture that seems so dehumanized, that is so dehumanized. So I think a lot of what's driving this is this desire to opt out of the objectified, subordinate, rapeable class and be a full human being, to be viewed as a full human being. I've heard so many young women who detransitioned who desisted say that they didn't want to worry about their weight, like that guys can be a little overweight and no one cares, where women police each other, the society polices you. It's considered okay to be schlubby, like the Seth Rogen kind of schlub still gets the girls, you know, but women have to police their bodies. They were tired of worrying about being raped all the time. Obviously, transing doesn't entirely get rid of the risk of violence, because you have these like little tiny men on the other side of transition in terms of what society sees, but they definitely feel less vulnerable to violence. And then what I've seen, you know, in midwifery and with the more trans activist, weaponized women who want to be viewed as men, is they really have become foot soldiers for policing women. I do think that there's some real internalized misogyny and some, you know, they jump class. They have jumped out of our class and are identifying with our oppressor class. And here they are coming into our spaces, telling us how to speak, how to think, how we have to change our language, how we have to elevate them to power, to positions of authority, because they're more important and more special than we are. So I think it's very multifactorial. And I also do think like there's an infiltration of porn and BDSM. I've seen there is like a weird sexual dynamic that I've been seeing lately with some people who are transitioning, where it seems like it's coming from a pornified place and starting to identify as a male. I think there's a Miranda July movie about that, where she's her character is expressing all this pornified sexuality, where she's wanting to have a penis, she's wanting to be the one who penetrates, she's wanting to be in the masculine role. So we can see that with the AGPs, and I think we're seeing that with the women who are transitioning now as well, the pornified mind.
Yeah, I was actually rereading about, I don't know if you both remember this, but there's a woman, a female journalist named Mac McClelland. Yeah, and so who's now going by Gabrielle? Gabrielle going as Gabrielle Mack. And she was featured on in a the New Yorker, in a cover story, and there's this image of her that's really disturbing, just in her underwear, and she has this beard. I mean, her face looks really bad. She wasn't like an unattractive woman. And she has this very large thing that's supposed to look like her penis, I guess. And then this huge, massive scar on her thigh where they took out the muscle and the fat and the veins and the arteries to try to shape this penis, which they attempted to attach onto her body a number of times, and there was a lot of complications. It's quite a gruesome story. She describes all of her surgeries and her surgeries failing and the apparatus being rejected and so on and so forth. But what was really interesting about her reasoning and her story behind why she decided she was a man and wanted to transition to become a man, I mean, it's all sexual trauma from the beginning. She had experienced a number of sexual assaults and molestations as a kid and a teenager. And then as a journalist, she was in Haiti and witnessed a lot of really traumatic sexual assaults around 2010 after the earthquake, and was totally traumatized. She had PTSD. And she talked about having asked a male friend to play out these violent rape fantasies on her, to essentially do BDSM role play, although it didn't sound like role play at all. Like, he beat her up and tried to suffocate her with a pillow, and it was very violent. And this was part of her attempting to deal with this sexual trauma. And she, you know, if you look into her and you read more about her, which you did, I read some stuff that she'd written prior. And this wasn't the first time she'd done this. She'd long been involved in violent sex and BDSM, and, you know, and had begun having dreams about herself as a man and herself as a perpetrator, like herself as the perpetrator of the sexual assault rather than the victim, which makes a lot of sense. As a victim, she was sort of, or her mind was, I guess, her psyche was seeking ways to take back that power and to turn that around and to no longer be a victim. But she took that to mean, these dreams in particular, of herself as a male perpetrator of sexual violence, that she was actually a man and that she should transition. I mean, it's all about disconnecting from the body, especially the traumatized body. But yeah, certainly connected to that sort of pornographic idea of men as sexually violent, and her wanting to be the sexually violent men. I think she identified as asexual, and it seems like a lot of these young women who transition to become men are identifying as asexual, which makes sense because you're messing around with your genitalia and you're attaching this thing to your body that you're never going to get sexual pleasure from. You're essentially ensuring that you're not going to have orgasms anymore.
So sad.
Yeah.
That story is really disturbing. And I think it was Isabella who pointed out that you know, New York Magazine is a style magazine. They're selling trends, and that they are pornifying this trans man look, right? That the scar, the phalloplasty scar on the thigh or the arm is sexy. The way she wrote that article is that's the article where she talks about her giant penis, right?
Yeah.
It's so sick. It's she's taking such pride in this lump of flesh that's between her legs, that's not a penis, that's probably going to become necrotic, that could even lead to her to get septic or die. She's a very, very mentally ill woman, and she's getting all this play in the high-end style trendsetter world.
Yeah.
I was just going to add that I seem to attract a lot of of that, like a fashion kind of aesthetic, like that trend setting, like the there's a pool of Instagram influencers who are would have just been like the more androgynous lesbians who have now become the trans men who can have the pornified women.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I speak to the like Justin Bieber kind of like sex appeal, that's the pool that I'm talking about. But I agree with what echoing, you know, what Mary Lou was saying about the, you know, just more generally the idea of wanting to like opt out, and to, like the beauty standards for women being so unattainable that it just is like a sigh of relief to just be like an average guy. And I've heard the same things. Like I spoke to this one woman who was medicalized when she was 13, and yeah, she really wanted to be a supermodel and was anorexic and just gave up. She's like, I can't have this relationship. I will never get my female body to the place I want it to be. So let's just have more flexibility and do this other thing. And I mean, yeah, I mean, I remember in my like starvation days, like really wanting to look like Mary-Kate and Ashley and fantasizing about, you know, having a breast reduction. I mean, I didn't even have large breasts, but I wasn't Mary-Kate and Ashley. You know, I wasn't like concave and, you know, so I think a lot of women can relate to hating their bodies, especially wanting to make their bodies smaller. So I definitely have empathy for that part. But what really irks me is like the kind of the intersection of capitalism with this trend, like fashion, film, brand deals. I mean, there's this one woman, I wish I knew her name. She medicalized and has this like super pornified girlfriend, and she has a daughter who's like a teenage daughter, and she makes like jokes about how they're mistaken for a couple in public. And like she likes it, like she wants to be like that's like the ultimate validation to pass, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she and her daughter have this brand, like they have all these brand deals. There's hundreds of thousands of followers. I wish I could remember her name, but yeah, they do like, yeah, it's just all exploitation and fetishization of this like particular like model-esque Bieber inspired trans man aesthetic. It's different from the buck. It's like different from the buck angel. Bearded, bulky, tattooed type. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I was reading about Buck Angel today, just a little bit. I mean, I watched, there was a documentary that was made about her that I watched prior to interviewing her a couple of years ago or a few years ago. And her story is really sad. But, you know, like every time I read these stories, they all end up seeming very similar. In fact, you know, Buck was a lesbian and had like a lot of internalized homophobia and self-hatred. A lot of self-hatred, really serious mental health struggles, a lot of cutting, a lot of drug abuse, alcohol abuse, trying to escape herself and her body and sort of hating what she is, but not being able to not be a lesbian, but wanting to deny that and not feeling comfortable with herself. Becoming homeless and getting involved in prostitution, which I'm sure added to all that trauma exponentially. And of course, the drug abuse and alcohol abuse. And yeah, and looking at where she is today, it's all really sad. And it's sad that, you know, like I've been thinking about our sort of our lack of women's culture and how that's factored into our, you know, as young women. And I mean, it's hard. I think it's hard for everybody to go through puberty. I think it's always been hard to go through puberty. But I feel like in the past, girls had the support of women and women's communities or some kind of like women's culture. And I feel like, I mean, all I can do is speak to myself and what I hear about young women going through nowadays. And I feel like when I went through puberty, I didn't know anything about my body. I didn't know anything about my fertility. I didn't know anything about my reproductive system. I didn't want to go through puberty. I didn't want to get my period. My understanding of my period was purely as inconvenience. You know, I didn't know what it was for even, really. Like, of course you have an understanding that it means you can get pregnant, but like I didn't understand the function of it. So I just wanted to disconnect. I didn't want it to come at all. And then when it did come, I wanted to get rid of it. So I wanted to just take the pill and never get my period. And I didn't do that. But, you know, I think that the idea of wanting to disconnect makes a lot of sense to me. There was never the option of transgenderism when I was young. And at a certain point, I moved towards wanting to be objectified and feeling powerful through objectification, which was, you know, its own bad path. But it didn't turn into me wanting to escape into being a man. But in some ways it did. In some ways I wanted to be like a man because it seemed freeing and you weren't vulnerable and you couldn't be used and you couldn't be hurt.
Right. You can wear what you want. Yeah, I, like most people, hated puberty. I tried to starve my breasts and my period away. I remember reading Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, and not relating at all. I could not. I was like, what the hell is this book? Where they're excited to have their breasts, be really big, and that they're excited to get their period. That was just completely incomprehensible to me. I relate to Dominique Christina's statement that for too many girls, the arrival of breasts coincides with uncles becoming predatory figures. Suddenly you're getting all this unwanted, creepy male attention, and everyone's commenting on. I think many of us are traumatized by that word developing. People are commenting on you developing. It's a really intense time, and we do, again, another overused term, but we do live in a rape culture. Like, every woman is aware of the threat of rape. It does affect our behavior. It does affect our sense of safety in the world, that we're aware that the male violence is a reality, and that awareness shows up in puberty for so many of us. That sense of danger. Yeah, and we don't have puberty rights. Most indigenous cultures have some kind of puberty rights. I think, now we're at the place where everything's pathologized. Every difficult feeling becomes a medical diagnosis. There is a medical cure for every form of discomfort. It's amazing that 100% of the girls aren't trans, right? It's shocking to me that it's actually not more common than it is.
When I interviewed the detrans women, when I've worked with them, like one-on-one privately too, my first question is always like, what was your relationship to the medical industrial complex before this? Like, how much medication were you on? Were you diagnosed with ADD? Are you vaccinated? Like, what do you identify as depressed? Do you identify as dyslexic? Like, and I think it's just, like you said, it's amazing there aren't more women, given that most, like the rates of hormonal birth control and the dissociation.
Sorry, there was like a huge thunder crash above my head, and it scared me.
You hear it? I
It
heard
was
it.
so loud. Sorry to interrupt. Go on.
It is scary. It is appropriate timing for this stuff.
It is.
Yeah.
Hopefully my power doesn't go up.
And this is, segues into the what in mental health is called comorbidity discussion, of how I don't know if I've ever met a trans-identified person who didn't also have a list of other mental illness identities and disorder identities that they hold as part of their sense of self. It's the one person I was thinking, there's that one person I've never heard her call herself disordered in other ways, and she's my outlier in the trans community. Just made a big announcement in my community of she's had undiagnosed ADHD her whole life, and now everything makes sense. And it really is so intertwined with the commodification of illness and the medicalization of the entire human experience.
Yeah, I mean the wanting to disconnect from all of your experiences. You feel unhappy, so you're depressed, so you go on meds. You feel stressed, so you have anxiety, so you go on meds. You can't focus, or you're not doing as well at school as you think you should be doing. So you have ADHD, you go on meds. You don't like puberty, so you must be actually a boy, you go on meds. Like, it's just freaking endless. And I mean, there's a lot of attention seeking attached. I just saw that woman Amanda Jett Knox who's trans, who mysteriously has like an entire trans family, and now she's trans actually, as it turns out, like, she's not getting, I think this woman is, I don't know, BPD, narcissist, something like that. I think any mother who parades their transitioned child around in the media for money and as their career is gross and or mentally disordered. But now she's a trans man.
We lose you, Meghan.
Uh-oh.
It's probably the storm down there. I don't know if the stream is still going, if she's just frozen. Looks like the stream is still going.
Can y'all comment if you can hear us?
Not seeing any comments. It's moving.
Silence.
Okay, silence.
Okay.
Helena, can you hear us at all? Yes. Okay, got it.
Okay, cool.
All right,
Not
just keep
Meghan.
going. Poor Meghan is frozen in the storm in Sayulita. Right. Okay. There we go. Yeah, I'm a little overwhelmed lately just how common this is. I just said I'm surprised that everyone's not trans, but it does seem like everywhere I go, I see a teenager on testosterone, or I see young trans-identified females pretty much every outing that I take.
Oh, yeah.
The storm hit you, Meghan?
I lost power for a minute, but then the power came back. So.
You're back.
Emma's okay in the storm?
She's a little bit scared, but she seems okay. I brought her into the room with me, so she started crying for a minute, but she seems okay. Anyway, hopefully the power sticks. Sorry about that. What were you saying?
I was just saying how here in the States, it is surprisingly common that literally every time I go out, I see young women on testosterone, teenagers and women in their 20s. You can tell the difference. It's easier to masculinize a female body than to try to feminize a male body.
Yeah, I think they pass easier. Although you can usually still tell a little bit, like, because it's always people who I'm just kind of like looking at weird, like there's something weird, and you're like, this person looks weird, like their hips look weird, the way they carry their weight is weird, the weight around their stomach is weird, and then like often there's things like small hands and small feet, but it's always just like, you look weird, like even if you kind of pass, you look a little bit weird.
And they've trained us like not to say that, like that's supposed to be that's offensive, not to stare, but I actually think it's a really healthy response to be reacting, not in like a violent response, but like, to be disgusted by healthy people being preyed upon and their bodies being mutilated surgically. Like, I think that's a quite healthy response, like, and like to have a visceral reaction, like to not have been desensitized to the kind of brutality that like Mary Lou's describing on her outings. Like, I think like I was just like at the farmer's market seeing a woman in suspenders with her double mastectomy scars, no shirt. It's pretty fucked up. And like, I wouldn't have that if we're talking about a woman who's like clearly like is not identifying as trans, has had a double mastectomy for like breast cancer or like whatever, like obviously this does not apply. Like, you can feel the pain. You might still have a visceral reaction and be like, oh, well, that must have been really hard on her body. She's just gone through, a lot in her body. But, with the ideology, it adds a level of like, just disgust. And I think we have to like be more comfortable saying like it is disgusting to see women's bodies mutilated and to see that be normalized. Like, when I saw Pride, it was out of control.
Right. there's so much endocrine disruption and derangement in, especially in the millennials and Gen Z. Like, I think that it's really skyrocketing. There's a great old book called Our Stolen Future that was written in the 90s about endocrine disruption. And I just think, oh, that was so prophetic. And they kept saying by 2020, we're just going to see the majority of young people with severe endocrine disruption. So you see that these males that are estrogenized, that they never see the sun. They're tan. I mean, they're blobby. They're pale. They're usually on psych meds. Psych meds cause a certain kind of weight gain that is it's not like looking like normal weight gain. Junk food causes a kind of weight gain that eating actual food you can't end up that disfigured by obesity if you're just overweight from eating healthy food as you can from eating all of this like chemical laden food. So I think it's getting harder to clock some of the trans identified females because of that. But the way I can tell the difference is they don't have the male boobs, right? Like they have this concave look to their chest, where these young males who are grossly overweight and vitamin D deficient and have, their bodies are not normal in terms of their endocrine function. They have a lot of fat on their chests, where the girls, it's almost concave, and that's the piece that hits me when I see them. And then they've got their scrappy facial hair, and their
the facial hair is always really bad.
Yeah,
and
really bad.
I feel like just like the energy, like it's not like I feel like we can feel when there are men in the room. We can feel when there are women in the room. And I have experience at restaurants pretty regularly where I don't even have to look directly, and I know that there are two women sitting beside me, like you don't. And then when you look, you get the confirmation. You look at the characters that you're describing, the signifiers that you're describing, Mary. But I feel like just the like we all, even with sophisticated medical technology, like you cannot mimic like aura or energy or whatever you want, how you want to call it. So that brings me comfort, but it is disturbing. Like if we as adults are having to do double takes, like it's just so messed up that children are like their senses are being distorted. Like, we haven't gotten into like the pregnant dads yet, but just the children who are being raised on this. Actually, it reminds about a year ago, I was in New York City with Kay Yang, and we had a megaphone out the van, and she was saying on the megaphone, "Trans women are men. Trans men are women." And there was a group of like 15-year-old girls. They couldn't have been more than 15, like on a corner, probably like coming out of school, and their backpacks and their jaws were like, I was just like, oh wow, they like don't know anything else.
I mean, I agree that we're biologically programmed to be able to tell sex differences, but I would argue it is less evolutionarily important for us to, if we mistake a female for a male, it does not increase any danger. It's like, it's like, okay, but I feel like I can clock a male who has artificial secondary sex characteristics pretty much 100% of the time. With females, it's not as evolutionarily vital to us to, it doesn't harm us at all to get it wrong with a female, to accidentally clock her as a male, because we're going to be protective of our offspring. There's a male in the room, and bears are like this other species where the males are violent, or the females are very good at telling who the males are. So I think that for a lot of people, it is harder to discern the trans-identified women. But you're right, the kids are being brainwashed where it's going to be harder and harder for them. It's like the emperor's new clothes for them, where they've been brainwashed since early infancy to not even allow themselves to think this way, to not even allow themselves to recognize.
Yeah, and I mean, that's going to be traumatic on a whole bunch of different levels beyond just not being allowed to say that's a man and that's a woman. Because what's happening, I actually just interviewed Jennifer Billick like an hour and a half ago, and so we talked about this briefly. which is that, you know, like kids are being taught very early on not to trust themselves, to not trust their intuition, to not trust their instincts, to not trust their gut. So they're going to grow up to be really insecure kids. Like they don't know what to think. They can't trust themselves. You know, you see a man in front of you, you know, it's a man. Maybe he has his penis out, like hopefully not, but you know, maybe he's in the change room and you're being told this is actually a woman. Like you cannot trust what's in front of your eyes. And that's a horrible thing to impose on a developing child.
That's horrible.
I wonder what you guys think though about that, the trans men who are like, I'm your father, but they're actually their mother, you know, like I'm actually a man and I'm breastfeeding you, or I breastfed you as a man. You have to call me dad. I mean, because I remember Posey, I remember Kelly J tweeted something saying that that was child abuse, and she got a ton of flack about that.
I think raising kids in a cult is child abuse. I think that this is, yeah, it's mind fucking of little kids. It's just not right. I don't know. I wonder what the backlash will be. I wonder as these kids grow up, how many will be angry about it. I think we're going to see a lot of anger around the reprotect technologies. I think we're already starting to see a little bit of that, where kids are upset, young adults are upset about being the product of a financial transaction. I think that some of these kids will speak out about it and some will be loyal to their parents, but no, it's wrong. It's wrong to tell a child that their father gave birth to them.
Yeah, and if your point of safety, you know, it's still their mother, so like they probably will still feel like that is the safest person to be with. And so when you're out in public, like you're gonna, you know, it's I hope that there's still some part of those women that are telling the children if they need somebody and they're lost, they should go to the kind of person that looks like this, who they probably won't call a woman. But like, you know, it's when you think about educating children on like safety protocol out in public, like it's incredibly disturbing. And I interviewed a woman named Lee who said that like at the like peak of her medical transition, there was this neighborhood little kid who would always want to hold her hand, who would always gravitate towards her. And the child could sense that, I guess, that she was a woman, but like Lee, it disturbed Lee because she didn't want this girl to learn that you can go up and like, you know, that you should go up and hold hands with people who look like her, you know? And she always had a dog with her. And so it was like, you know, she's a woman. She's a warm, you know, welcoming woman. And this child gravitated to her. And she mentioned like resisting and like wanting to try to like teach, like there was a part of her that wanted to like teach the kid that like, no, this actually isn't safe. But it's so confusing because she's actually a woman. The child actually does have their instincts there, but it can also be very scary and damaging. And, you know, I always think of the example of like children in bathrooms, you know, like when I would be alone with my dad in public, he would never take me into the men's room. He would always ask a woman, preferably like with a child, to take me into the women's room to pee, you know, like he knew, and most people know, that children are better off, you know, with women who are strangers rather than being in a bathroom with tons of men in like a public park or exposed to all the penises. Yeah, it's like traumatized. It doesn't matter if your dad's there. Like there's all these fucking random dudes. The children thing is really disturbing. And and it also is like, it reminds me of like the grooming of in child porn, you know, where you give different names for things. You're just breeding disembodiment and confusion. And when you're that confused, you're vulnerable to all sorts of outside forces. And, you know, we already have the issue of some women not even knowing that we have two holes in the front, you know, that they have different functions. We're just starting to like see anatomically correct images of our clitoris, like, and now this, just 20 steps back. Like it's yeah, for like children to grow up seeing their mom's enlarged clit, thinking that's female anatomy, that's what like gave birth to them. It's and then wanting the same, you know, like it's also normal for children to want to emulate the bodies of their parents or to want to look like the bodies of their parents. And you don't have a marker in the house for a female body and your female body is changing. Like where will these children see themselves? Like,
well, so many trans-identified parents end up having trans-identified children, and it seems.
Yeah, that's weird. And I mean, I have to assume that that's indoctrination, that their parents are teaching them about transgenderism and asking their kids about transgenderism constantly, and like sort of, yeah, their whole lives are learning about this whole gender identity thing. Because it's weird how many trans identified parents are suddenly, all of a sudden, all my kids are trans too. Weird.
The babies. Isabella, were talking to someone who had been they-theming her baby for. That's so common, to let your kid choose their gender. It's a baby.
Yeah. She had a they them baby, and then was like, this is, what if my child is told by a man that like this is a lady dick, like that this is, you know, that this is a mother dick, this is a mommy dick, you know, what, like just, yeah. Who will her child go to when she's in need, if sex is a choice? The man in the dress?
Yeah, it's so dangerous. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that for so long kids have learned who they can go to, yeah, if they get lost or they're in trouble. And now it could be anybody.
And it seems intentional. And just having been raised like very Catholic in a diocese where the priests were literally running a child prostitution ring, and that's been like proven through a grand jury inquiry. And what we know now, and you know, Sinead O'Connor dying, and like really like understanding like how long we weren't allowed to talk about that, for how long we weren't allowed to talk about the institutionalized child rape in the Catholic Church. And my own upbringing was this indoctrination that the safest person to ever be with is the priest. Say he's safer than your parents. He's, you know, you do everything he says. And now I see this other class of men in dresses being elevated as the most wonderful men in the world, and come, you know, listen to them read to your children and let your toddlers.
And they'll be your real family. And if your family doesn't support you, you can run away and you can stay with me at my house.
It feels very intentional and evil. And I never wanted to be the person to believe that pedophilia was rampant in the in the gay male community, but it's rampant in the male community, you know, regardless. And this feels, it's like the new iteration of getting access to children and grooming children to participate.
Yeah, I mean, the messaging is there's this woman who's a instructor or a professor, I think just an instructor at UBC, and her name is Katya Thiem or something. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it properly, but and I know who she is because she was one of the people trying to stop my events from happening in Vancouver rather obsessively. But she tweeted something recently about how kids should be exposed to penises. Yeah, kids should be exposed to naked bodies, including penises, all the time in non-sexual contexts. Like, this should be totally normalized. Can you imagine saying that little kids should be exposed to random men's penises?
Ugh. Is she trans-identified? Does she say she's a man, or are they them?
She's not trans identified. I think she might be a she her, but let me just take a look.
Yeah.
But it's just a crazy, like, I don't know. It's hard for me to believe that these people are all evil, but I mean, I think some of them have just turned this into, they've intellectualized themselves right out of something rational or right out of reality, right?
Mm-hmm. It is like a new religion. It's very much like a new religion.
Katia team.
That so many women, and this is where, we
Oh,
do need
she, they. She's a she, they.
She, they, what the fuck? So, what does that even mean? Seriously.
I have heard. Wait, this is actually the most like logical explanation I've heard for it, that it mimics the point in the medicalization. So like they're like, I'm stuck in the wrong body, she, her. I'm considering medicalization, she, they. And then it's like, oh, I've gotten the beard. Probably makes more sense to be a he, him. He, they. Some in some cases it tracks the degree of medicalization, because it's just so embarrassing if it's so obviously not. Like if I'm like, I'm a he, him, it's like I'm not even trying.
Yeah. So, I found her tweet. She says, "Hey, want to know one of my all-time excellent parenting ideas? Let little children see penises and vulvas of various ages and sizes in a casual, normalized, totally safe way.
Oh my gosh.
The world will thank you for it, and so will those children when they grow up."
Watching women participate in this is particularly painful, on all of it, and it is often a third rail in radical feminist discourse that we don't discuss how the transjacked women are really pushing this forward, and we wouldn't be in this mess if so many of them hadn't collaborated with it.
Right. I mean, yeah. And I mean, this is something that is always pointed out to me every time I say, like, this is about men and their fetishes. This is about sexologists, or this is about big pharma. This is about wealthy billionaires who are men. These are the people who push this forward. These are the people who created this. But, yeah. And people, often men will respond and say, like, but feminists did this. This is the fault of feminists. Look at all the women who've gone along with it. And it's true. And I'm not going to pretend like, oh, all these women are sad little victims, because fuck you. Like, women have as much responsibility to be honest and to have integrity as anybody else. And they're all of the women who've gone along with this are liars or they're stupid. And being a liar is worse, but being stupid isn't impressive either. I mean, and I think the vast majority of them are liars. I mean, most people know that trans women are not actually women. Give me a break. Some of them may be stupid and might believe that there's such a thing as being trapped in the wrong body or something like that. Or maybe there's such a thing as a female brain and a male brain. But that there's such a thing as a male body and a female body. And I don't think that these women deserve any excuses either. But the difference is that I don't think that they created it. I think they went along with it, which in some ways it might even be worse. You know what I mean? Like, a bad person can do or say a bad thing or present a bad idea or to try to push a bad idea forward. But everybody else going along, they're the people who make it happen, right?
Yeah. And they're weaponized, and they're not the generals. They're not the orchestrators of this. They're not the captains of industry who are imposing this on society. But they're very much the foot soldiers in a lot of places, especially women's culture, and in academia, it's often women doing this. Indoctrinating other young people. Like what you're saying about I think UVic was the first transgender studies department from Pritzker, and now my alma mater, the little liberal arts college I went to, the women's studies was turned into gender and sexuality studies when I was there. So reducing women, we went from women to being reduced to sex stereotypes and fucking, right? Like that's women now, like breaking us down, gender and sexuality. And now that's completely transjacked, and they're adding a transgender studies department. So they get two departments essentially. And it's often women pushing that. And then what we see is, there's no trans man equivalent of Jennifer James Pritzker or Martine Rothblatt. There are lower level women, right? There are women policing other women. And whenever the men who say they're women get press and publicity, it's he's the richest woman, he's the fastest woman, he's the strongest woman, he's the most powerful woman in the military. And when the trans men get press, it's like a man had a baby.
Yeah, they have no power. I mean, it's just stupid. Like, they've been duped in the worst possible way. They're selling themselves out. They're selling all women out. They get nothing out of it except for social acceptance. Like, the women who do it, I think it's all about social acceptance. And I think some people will say it like, oh, it's scary because of violent threats. You might get fired and so on and so forth, which is true. But I think that the primary motivation of women who go along with this transgender ideology is for social acceptance, to be liked, to be clapped at, to feel like, to be treated as a good person, to be applauded by their friends and accepted by their friends, which, ostracization is really scary. Like, it's a really horrible form of punishment. So there's lots of good evolutionary reasons why we would avoid ostracization at any cost, because we might die if we get kicked out of the community or the tribe or whatever. But nonetheless, I mean, I don't know how people can live with themselves while telling these lies that are so destructive. Someone in the comments asked if butch lesbians were trans men.
No, I mean, butch lesbians were, Pippa Fleming says that butch lesbians are an ancient tribe of Amazonian women who are necessary for the liberation of all women, for us to be able to see these women who don't conform to femininity, who are sovereign. And I really think that butch erasure is a huge part of the transgender movement, that the disappearing butch, the woman who doesn't conform. Unfortunately, now so many butch lesbians, when they're young, are getting pressured into this. It used to be the biggest insult to tell a lesbian, oh, you're really just a man. In my generation, in the 80s and 90s, that was a huge insult. And now it's like so many women who are butch lesbians or have, who have that presentation are taking that on themselves, saying they actually are men.
It is weird. It's weird how many lesbians have given up their lesbian status.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there doesn't seem to be much lesbian pride happening, that's for sure.
Do young people still use the term lesbian? Isabella, do you know if
I had some disturbing encounters at Pride in New York City. This one woman who wasn't medicalized was screaming at me that she loves to sleep with trans lesbians. And I was like, I was literally like, you are bisexual. She did not like that.
Does she only like to sleep with trans lesbians, or
no?
Okay.
She likes to sleep with women. She likes to sleep with women and men. But she described it as women and trans lesbians. Like I can't remember what she said. And I was like, it's totally fine to be bisexual. Like, sexuality is based on your sex. So if you're sleeping with a trans lesbian, you are sleeping with a man. If you are sleeping with a woman, you are sleeping with a woman. It's your same sex. So it makes you bisexual. She was like, no. She just, I think so. Not only is the lesbian word not a thing, but like bisexual seems to be outdated as well.
Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
it's all trans and queer and asexual and the wide variety of other weird sexualities that you can have that aren't certainly not heterosexual, but also not gay or lesbian and bisexual. I mean, being bisexual used to be a cool trend not very long ago, you know, in the 90s because it turned men on, but still. I fucking
Totally.
hated that.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and it sucks for the actual bisexuals. Like the bisexual women that I've talked to are like, yeah, it's really frustrating because people think like we want the mutilated people, but we just want like whole. Some of them just still want whole body intact, either men or women. Like being bisexual does not mean you want every medicalization of woman or every degree of medicalization of man. Like, you know, but I think perhaps maybe
Well,
the
who
younger
wants
generation
those
thinks
medicalized bodies? Who's attracted to those medicalized bodies?
it.
Who?
You can fetishize anything. Like it's a thing. Like what we were talking about with the woman who goes by Gabrielle Mack, you know, on the cover of New York Magazine. Like,
Well, she's not sleeping with anybody. I guarantee that.
well, right? She's asexual, but it's still a naked body.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I think you can. I mean, that's the horror of pornographic programming is that you can get sexually fixated on almost anything. Like, there are a lot of really crazy fetishes, and it's really increasing with pornography. And I don't even want to peek into the world of what's in pornography, but I'm sure that there are a lot of mastectomy scars and phalloplasties, and and we know that the lady boys, like that's been a huge fetish for a very long time in the portified John community.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, what a time. It feels so sci-fi. It just feels like we're just so untethered from our humanity and our sexuality. Oof.
Yeah. Does anyone watching have any questions? If so, please put them in the live chat. If you've just joined, please like and subscribe. This is our third episode in a series of 4 called What Are the Women? Sorry, I have vertigo, everybody. I have like really bad jet lag, so my brain feels like it's jiggling around right now. So I keep getting my words wrong, and it's not. Yeah, I'm trying to not move my head around too much, but like, where are all the women is what the stream is called. And our group is Feminists for Free Speech. And if you're interested in donating to support us, we would really appreciate it. We're hoping to put on some in-person events. We did some very successful, great events in Austin last year. We would love to do more. We want to hear more women talking about these issues, about gender identity, women's rights, bodily autonomy, civil liberties, free speech, transhumanism. I'd love to get more into that because I think that's all pretty clearly connected, although people tell me that it's not clearly connected.
Well, Martin Rothblatt himself wrote a book in the early 90s about he's a man who says he's a woman who's also a transhumanist, and his book was called From Transgender to Transhuman, and he talks about how transgenderism is the on-ramp to transhumanism. So it's so fascinating that people tell us it has nothing to do with transhumanism when the men orchestrating this themselves have said that on the public record.
Seems like they really spelled it out for us.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I mean, Jennifer Billick explains it really well. I listened to your podcast, Isabella, with her recently, which was great. And yeah, I mean, I'm new to transhumanism, so I'm just learning about it. But it seems to me to be very much this whole transgenderism thing connected in the way that it's about disconnecting us from our nature and attaching various parts to various people. It seems like we're trying to take reproduction and childbirth and childbearing away from women and put it into the hands of technology, into big tech, with these like new technologies that are supposedly allowing men to lactate and to breastfeed babies, which is disgusting.
Yeah.
and, you know, womb transplants.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. Kay Yang got way deep in the class she taught for my platform called The Great Reset of Motherhood, where she goes like to antiquity, you know, like that all of this like female erasure and pregnant men and female impersonators, like it's actually not that new. Like obviously the technology wasn't there, but this sick impersonation and erasure is actually been going on for thousands of years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's real messed up.
Men want the magic birth power.
Right, of course. That
Yeah.
is the power, after all.
Right.
The power to create life.
Yeah. And it is another place where it really has been women who say they're men who have like come and wrecked this, like, are handing it to the men. Do you want to talk about Trevor McDonald, Isabella?
Yeah. So Trevor McDonald is the author of it's a woman, the author of a book called Where's the Mother that was required reading for my doula certification training in 2016 with Doula Trainings International. And yeah, it's she has a male partner, and the whole book is about her like struggle and like commitment to finding breast milk. Like a huge part of it is about her finding breast milk for her baby, who she can no longer feed from her own breast because she doesn't have any breasts anymore because she had them electively surgically removed. She talks about being, you know, in the hospital and the nurses being confused and like, yeah, it's like, it reminds me of the autogonophilia where it's like, don't they know that people know? And it's like there's an element of like wanting to be looked at, like wanting to be seen as the freak, you know? So she's like, you know, she describes it as kind of like perhaps insensitive, but also is like, you can tell she's taking pleasure in the curiosity that ensues, like when she enters a room as a quote pregnant man. And I interviewed Mary Lou about this in 2020, and Mary Lou, I loved how you talked about that her story is framed as a hero's journey, and that's exactly how it was talked about, you know, in my like book report basically that I had to write, and how we talked about it amongst like the doulas in my like groups at that time. But yeah, and she ends up exploiting other women in her community for breast milk because she knows that breast milk is best. Like she hasn't been so far indoctrinated by like the formula industry to say things like fed is best, but of course men can give birth, but maybe fed isn't best. And she's committed to some kind of naturalness in this whole experience. And so, yeah, she like manically solicits women in her community to
hook themselves up to milking machines. On her behalf.
Yeah.
Exactly. Pumping is like, it's dehumanizing. It's not, I know we're a pump culture now and people, like, I'm not really pro breast pump. I think it's insane that like people think mandatory state mandated pumping rooms are some kind of liberation for women. I'm like, now you have to be your own fucking wet nurse. So I'm swearing a lot. I hope that's okay, Megan.
I've been swearing a lot too.
So, you know, yeah, so Trevor McDonald is a heterosexual woman, right, who identifies as a man, who says she's a man. She's in a relationship with a man. She made her babies the old-fashioned way through penis and vagina intercourse, and but she's like a pregnant man, and yeah, and that she would exploit the other women around her too, so she could put their milk in a supplemental nursing system hanging on her chest with a tube going to her surgically mutilated nipple, and put her baby to her mastectomy scars to pretend to breastfeed. So she sued the La Leche League to allow fathers to be La Leche leaders.
I did not know that.
so destructive. She's so incredibly
Oh
destructive.
my God.
So La Leche started in the 50s or 60s as this radical organization trying to bring breastfeeding back. Women like my mother were told breast milk is bad for infants. They were given medications right after they delivered to dry up their breast milk. The formula industry came in hard, like, sell, here's a product we can sell to every person who's born. And they hoodwinked the women into believing their own milk was inferior to this product called formula. Like, what a weird name that we've normalized. Here's your formula. It's so space age. And the La Leche League was a radical response to that, where these women were bringing back breastfeeding. It was a female-only space. Like AA, it was almost like I wouldn't call it like anarchist principles, but it was decentralized. It was non-monetized. They never charged any money for help. It was all over North America, and then it spread internationally, where women could provide support to other women. It was this amazing organization that helped bring back breastfeeding in a woman-oriented way. And Trevor McDonald kind of was one of the women who destroyed the La Leche League. It's just a shell of itself now, where they've changed all their languaging to they used to have a book called The Womanly Art of Breastfeeding, which I kind of bristled at as a young, that word womanly bothered me kind of, but now I'm like, okay, that was their book.
Yeah, I have that book.
Right. And now it would be like The Personally Art of Human Milk.
Oh my gosh.
They've changed all their language. It's like pregnant person breast chest feeding, human milk feeding. We can't even call it. Yeah. And she was one of the women at the forefront of that. She sued them to allow men to be La Leche leaders and to allow fathers into the group, because she considered herself a man and a father.
That is so messed up. I did not know that. One detail that I just remembered is when I was getting my lactation counselor certification, they hadn't been transed yet. And the feedback, the survey that I filled out, I said, it could be more inclusive.
Oh, Isabella, I'm so glad you wrote that.
That's nice. That's nice of you. You're such a nice girl.
Now they're pushing for actual biological men to be able to take these disgusting drugs to create secretions from their nipples and to feed those to infants and to provide support to the men who want to do that.
It's disgusting.
Sick things. It's really sick.
What I wonder about is the men whose female partner is trans. And they stay with this weird, freakish-looking woman who claims to be a man and now has a beard and is kind of chubby and schlubby and cut off her breasts and who knows what else. I mean, there is that. I don't know if you guys remember Sadie Doyle. She was like a liberal feminist blogger back when I started blogging in kind of like 2010, 2011. She was known for being like sarcastic and snarky and rude. And she at some point became Jude Doyle. And she's still in her relationship with the male partner. And yeah, that Mac McClelland person was identifying as asexual before she transitioned, although she had a boyfriend. So she had a boyfriend, but was identifying as asexual and then transed. I mean, I presume that those relationships fall apart, or, maybe he's using porn, or maybe he's allowed to sleep with other people, or I don't know what, but it makes no sense to me that any heterosexual man would stay with a woman who becomes a trans man.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. And then they re-identify as a gay male couple, usually.
Like, now you're gay. Right. Yeah, it's odd. That's what some real, like, emasculation in some way, right?
That's the, that reminds me of, like, what Mary Lou was speaking of, like, the women just wanting to be, like, full humans, and relate. Like, this woman I interviewed named Lee Janet Marshall, talked about, like, getting addicted to gay porn when she was in middle school. Because, like, she couldn't relate to the way the women were being treated, and she, like, was hetero, so, like, you know, she could still find arousal in seeing like men naked, but like she needed the like full human, like she was able to do, like she was able to experience like they were able to be in their like full spectrum of humanity, whereas like the women weren't. And then the next step, like the trajectory makes sense when you consider that.
Yeah, like I remember hearing about women, I think in the aughts, who were like into watching gay men's porn, which I never understood. I mean, I don't want to watch any porn because I think it's all disgusting. But why would you, if you're, you know, well, I guess it makes sense if you're a heterosexual woman that you wouldn't want to watch a woman being abused. So maybe it would be more entertaining to you somehow to watch gay male porn.
What about like, I mean, what about the like Brokeback Mountain programming and like the like getting more like women getting more comfortable seeing,
like thinking that it's hot to see two men.
Yeah, not that we shouldn't see same-sex like love plot lines. Like I'm not saying that that's inherently bad, but there's like softcore porn that you know, that all women were like obsessed with in Brokeback Mountain. Like all my friends like loved that movie. I loved that movie. Like it was so moving and like, you know, just like that there's some programming there.
What I've been noticing post Brokeback Mountain is that gay men get romance. Like they get the romance stories, right? Like they get wined and dined and they get foreplay in pop culture, where women get like, oh, we're a little bit attracted to each other, and the next thing you know, he's like bending you over the washing machine. Like it's, you know, women are getting really brutalized in pop culture, PG-13 and R-rated stuff, where gay men get flowers and roses and the bed is covered in rose petals and there are candles. Like all the stuff that used to be male-female romance now only happens in between two men in most of the pop culture stuff that I've been watching lately. I'd be interested in seeing if you two are seeing that as well. Maybe it might be confirmation bias on my part, but it really feels that way to me.
I feel that like all that I'm really watching these days is reality TV and then documentaries.
Yeah, probably not happening.
I feel like there's no good movies or rom-coms. I used to love watching rom-coms and now they're all terrible.
Yeah.
They've all gone woke, of course, so.
Totally.
Anyway.
Should we plug our Austin event?
Oh, yes, I was going to do that. I just opened up the link.
Yeah.
Good call. Thank you. So, Let Women Speak is coming to Austin on August the 12th. Please join us. We are rallying at 7 p.m. I'm posting the link in the chat, and I will also put it in the show notes. Everyone is welcome to come to the rally. Please register so that you can get. The location has been kept secret, so if you would like to know the location so that you can attend the event, you'll need to register via the link that I just shared in the live chat. And we are also doing a VIP after party, and you can buy tickets via that link. Also, it's going to be really fun. We have a very, very, very small, very limited amount of tickets for sale. The venue has a small capacity, so we can only sell a certain amount of tickets, but it'll be intimate, so you'll get to know us all real well.
I'm so excited. It's going to be so much fun. The last one was like insanely fun.
Yeah, the last one was great. And so who's going to be there? It's Isabella, me, Mary Lou, Michelle Evans, of course, who's been doing most of the work organizing. She's amazing. And Kay Yang, Amy Sousa,
A-Swags,
Carrie Smith.
Oh, yeah, Carrie Smith.
Amy, I think maybe Amy Ichikawa. Is she coming?
I'm not sure.
Maybe it's going to be great. It's going to be a lot of people.
Yeah, so please join us. It's going to be a good time. And do we have anything else that we need to say? Isabella, do you have anything you need to promote at the moment?
Oh, good question. No, we just finished up the series with Jennifer Law, this 3-week series on the medical legal ethics of IVF and surrogacy and ART, and all the classes that I've done are available as recordings on my site. But yeah, that's over. Taking a little August break.
Great.
Great.
Okay, well, we hope to see any of you who are in Austin on the 12th. Thank you so much for joining us today. Don't forget to like and subscribe so that you don't miss the next stream, which we'll schedule a date for soon and post about soon. I guess it'll be after Austin.
Okay.
So sometime later in August.
Cool.
But yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in. Thank you, Isabella and Mary Lou.
Thank y'all.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay,
Bye,
bye
everyone.
everyone.
Good
Have a great
night.
night.